All right. Hey, Facebook. How is everybody doing tonight? I am so excited to be on. We have an incredible group of folks that are going to be on the panel today to talk about SB 90, HB1, and the recent passage of voter suppression laws in Georgia as well. So I want to start out by doing some introductions. My name is Bernice. I am the regional director with For Our Future in West Central Florida. So that means Hillsborough County. Shout out to Tampa is my hometown area here. And I'm super grateful to be on with y'all tonight. I am going to pass it over to one of the other incredible folks on here tonight, and that is my colleague, David.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Akintande. I am with For Our Future as well, and I am the North Florida regional. So I am everywhere between Leon County and Gadsden County. So we do all the grassroots organizing and fieldwork up here, and I'm extremely excited to be here with each of you all and look forward to a very fruitful conversation.
Awesome. League of Women Voters of Hillsborough County, we have Dr. Idelia Phillips, who is an just amazing presence, and we're so lucky to have her on. So thank you and welcome, Dr. Idelia. Would you like to offer any greetings from the League?
Certainly. Greetings from the League. Very pleased to be included in this event, and I hope to portray the League's position on these egregious bills.
Absolutely. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Abdillah from ACLU. So welcome and thank you for joining us, Abdillah.
Thanks for having me. Like you said, my name's Abdillah Skir. I'm the voting rights policy strategist here at the ACLU of Florida. Happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. And I really love the cat tree that you have in the background also. This is one of those Zoom things, right?
Thank you, yeah. Only the best.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. I think it's really important to talk about where are we right now. And I know we want to talk about Georgia, but we're going to hold off for a brief second because we've got one more guest joining us in a bit who can tell us a little more about Georgia. But let's start talking about HB1, which is the anti-protest bill. I'd love to hear from you, Idelia. How do you feel about HB1 and, what's the League's position on this?
Oh, I thought you said Abdillah, but
it's weird because I said a combination of the both of them.
I think so.
Whoever would like to go first.
Well, as everyone probably knows, HB1 will impact our freedom of speech. The various items that are included in that bill, if one person in the protest group, and maybe an adjunct to the group, are not even involved, if they do something that's illegal, then the entire group will be punished for someone who may not even be a part of the group. No explanations, no questions, nothing. The second thing, which is quite unbelievable, but this bill provides permission to someone who's driving a vehicle to drive through and to the individuals included in the protest group. Perhaps somebody can explain that to me. Why would you allow someone to, and I'm saying it's intentional, to drive through a group of human beings and possibly and most likely harm those in the group? Someone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I would say that it truly highlights the broadening of the scope of how the authorities could be very invasive in how they attack individuals that just want freedom of speech or want to talk about certain issues. Because to the root, this is what the country stands on. It's the fact that if we see it wrong, we're able to go out and express our feelings on that. And the fact that this is being targeted in the way that it did get targeted, of last summer, whenever, as we saw the fallen individual George Floyd, this is the reaction to that. It wasn't a policy change into how officers can, affect or how we can speak out on certain issues. They literally said, we're going to silence you from speaking out about injustices. So it's a negative aspect, and we're going in the completely opposite way that we should be as a country. And I second everything that Dr. Phillips said. This is a very horrendous bill that is being rushed, through this entire process.
And I hope people understand that it impacts any group who wants to protest, who wants their voices heard. Not just those who were protesting under the guise, and that's really not a correct word, but the banner of Black Lives Matter. And if someone can tell me that other groups are excluded, I'd like to hear that. But it is an offshoot of Black Lives Matter. And that in itself is a statement.
Absolutely. And like David mentioned, this was a direct response to those Black Lives Matter protests around the country last year. It's a direct response to that. And, the leadership came out after the Capitol insurrection, used that to justify its filing. But this was announced months before that.
Mm-hmm.
This bill would, its intention is to silence dissent and punish protesters who last year were mainly seeking justice for police brutality. It has overly broad and vague language, and that's specifically designed to chill speech and assembly. Like Adelia mentioned, it'll increase violence against protesters. And importantly to mention, we already have laws against destruction of property and violence. So this is an unnecessary bill to really bring forward. There are also concerns about, Confederate monuments. Why does this need to be included in that? It doesn't make much sense.
I had no idea about the Confederate monument piece. Out of curiosity, is it like protecting them, or what's the intent behind that?
I think it is the protection of those monuments. It's just hard to consider that these monuments sort of advertise democracy. So as Abdila, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, as he indicated, the bill is not necessary. And we have laws and procedures for dealing with violence against other individuals, people who are not protesting, but rioting. And there is a difference. And I don't think this bill explains the difference between those two. But never mind that, there are laws to protect individuals and buildings and other properties from violence.
Yeah. And what I would say is what's very alarming is the expedient way they're doing it, right? So if we, in our nation's history, right, everything was always incremental, civil rights, incremental, Voting Rights Act, incremental. But with this, when to silence what is extremely progressive, right? It's an extremely fast approach, and they don't go through the legitimate process of making sure you're hearing every voice on the aspect of it. And it is, like I said, it highlights just how fast they move against the wrong thing. This should not be something that's moving along as fast as it is. So I state it's extremely alarming, and I hope that this is halted immediately. So we have to keep doing the work we can.
Right. And on that note, I think it's important to point out for folks who may be watching who don't quite know how the process works. Usually how it works is the House has one bill, the Senate has their bill, they each go through their committees, and then they get voted on by the floor. The House version already went through its committees. It got voted on in the House. The Senate version of this bill was referred to 3 committees. It didn't go through any of the committees. So what they did was they said, okay, we'll take the House version of this bill. We'll assign it to just one committee, appropriations, not dealing with criminal justice, not dealing with judiciary, none of the other previously assigned committees. They're going to hear that and then put it to the floor for a vote because they have the votes there rather than in the prior committees. And that's contrary to the entire purpose of this process, which is to, like you said, make sure that all stakeholders can have their voice heard and any problems are properly addressed.
It's mind-blowing to me how quickly they pushed it through the Senate, and also Senator Jason Pizzo's committee, they also like intentionally just bypassed it because they knew that was going to be an issue for them. So it's being done in like a very undemocratic way. And, you know, there's a hearing, I believe they're hearing it in appropriations tomorrow. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know, David, what's your sense from Tallahassee about like what's happening over there, or do folks feel like it's just moving forward and it's gonna pass?
No, it's an uproar, right? So, like going back to Abdilla's point, right? The stakeholders who are affected in this aren't allowed to have a voice, you know. And given that we're in unorthodox times where you can't go to the Capitol and speak, you have to go to the Civic Center and speak, and just the process of that is extremely intricate and daunting. So the true people that need to be heard aren't being heard in the matter. And you see, if you're in the progressive community, you understand the stakes that are happening right now. People are speaking out about it, but the sad part is people aren't being heard, you know, and it's because this is being fast-tracked, and all the measures of how the checks and balances of a bill is supposed to go through aren't going through. So it's extremely discouraging, but at the same time, we have to keep fighting. But it's just terrible how the process has been going along for these past couple of months.
It's being fast-tracked such that you don't have time for public comment.
Exactly.
And if you don't want people to speak out against it, then you just railroad the bill through. But that doesn't say that our citizens can still call our legislators, email them, and let them know whether it's good or bad in terms of the outcome. Let them know that you really don't appreciate the process nor the content. And I don't know if I can say this or not, but remember that, remember all that's going on in the next elections session. And remember those who have been involved in fast tracking this bill through. Remember, you must remember, because the ballot box is the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to bring us to, I'm going to make a small change here. We were going to talk about Georgia, but we have a guest. Oh,
he's back.
Well, isn't that great timing?
It is.
So I'm so happy to have Jamil on. Jamil is from my Black Momentum family. So super glad to have him on, Dream Defenders family. Jamil, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself and your organization?
Sure. So as Bernice said, I'm Jamil Davis. I'm the Florida lead organizer for Black Voters Matter. We are an incredible organization that organizes within 10 states across the country. Florida obviously being one of them, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be on the call with each and every one of you all this evening. Some I do know, some I'm meeting just for the first time, but just, very honored to be discussing all things voter suppression and anti-protests. So yeah.
Yeah, and Jamil, we were just wrapping up talking about HB1. Just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add about HB1 that you wanted to let folks know.
I'm actually sitting in a hotel room in Tallahassee, Florida right now, because tomorrow the Senate Appropriations Committee will be hearing HB1 both on tomorrow and Saturday. And so I'm currently here right now to testify in opposition to HB1, which, I mean, I don't think I can say anything that hasn't already been said about this bill, whether on this particular outlet or just in any other outlet. It is not a bill that is due to the Capitol attacks. It is due to every protest that has happened in this state last year during the movement for Black Lives, surrounding Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tony McDade, Jamie Johnson, name a name that happened in 2020 and before then, and that's what we were here for. And just speaking on a personal level, we did protest in the city that I live in, which is Pensacola, Florida. We did protests for an upwards of almost 16 days at this general location. It was called Graffiti Bridge. And the reason it's called Graffiti Bridge is because of literally, like, they put graffiti murals on this old train track bridge. And so June the 6th of last year was the day that I feel as though not only the city government of Pensacola, but also the state of Florida knew that there wasn't any games being played when it came to stuff that was going, the movement work we were doing in Pensacola. So initially everything started at Graffiti Bridge, but right next to Graffiti Bridge is an actual bridge that people drive their cars on and traffic moves on. It's called 3 Mile Bridge, but it's now known as the Chappie James Memorial Bridge. And so as the work was being done, this whole protest rally situation was happening, everything transitioned over to the Chappie James Memorial Bridge, and that bridge was blocked. And that bridge was blocked for 35-40 minutes. And from that 35-40 minute blocking of that bridge, we were able to have the mayor of Pensacola honor one of our demands, because we had a list of demands, because the year prior to that, a 26-year-old Black man by the name of Tamar Crawford was gunned down by an officer of the Pensacola Police Department. And so we had already had a list of demands. And when George Floyd happened, we just rolled the momentum of George Floyd back onto the family of Tamar Crawford. And one of the demands we had was the installation of a civilian advisory committee. And from that 35-40 minute overtaking of Chappie James Bridge, the mayor finally gave into that demand to give us a civilian oversight committee in the city of Pensacola.
Wow, that's incredible.
But we literally feel as though, being selfish and somewhat cocky a little bit, we feel as though HB1 is a side effect of what happened on that bridge, because there were actual businesses, their trucks were on that bridge that day. And so for 35 to 40 minutes, commerce stopped that day. And so phone calls got to be made. Like, why are my trucks still sitting on this bridge? If you start finding out why your trucks are still sitting on this bridge, there we are. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. That just shows the power of protest and how protest has for centuries been what has moved us, but especially in this country has been what moves us towards civil rights. I want to bring us to just a brief conversation. I apologize, my dog is in the background squeaking his toys. I want to bring us to a brief conversation about Georgia. I know from everyone has been watching in the news about what's happened with Georgia with this new voter suppression bill that they passed. And I know one of the biggest sticking points has been how you're no longer allowed to pass out water. I'm sure everybody on this call has volunteered and has gone to polling places. And this is it. This is tradition. This has been going on for years. You just go, and while people are in line waiting to vote, you just bring them a water bottle, and it's not a big deal. People are thirsty. It's hot. It's the end of the day. They need some water, but in Georgia now that's illegal. And I know that Black Voters Matter has been doing some work, and I'd love to hear from Abdillah too, like your take on what happened in Georgia.
Absolutely. Well, what we saw not just in Georgia but across the country was a response to historic turnout and an increase in vote by mail participation in 2020, a nationwide attack on voting rights that we haven't seen since the days of Jim Crow. In 47 different states, over 360 pieces of legislation have been filed to roll back voting rights. And this is nationally one of the more egregious ones, and rightfully so. It does several things, not just the handing out food and water to people in line, although that rightfully gets a lot of people riled up. It also bans mobile voting. It narrows ID requirements for absentee ballots. It restricts drop boxes and drastically reduces early voting for runoff elections. And like I said, we're seeing this nationwide trend of attacks on voting rights in response to record turnout.
Yeah, Jamil, I'd love to hear from you. I know that you weren't super involved with what went on in Georgia, but just what was the sense from your colleagues about that fight against this bill in Georgia?
The sense from a lot of the colleagues within Georgia has been not only putting ourselves in the position to hold our state legislators accountable for this egregious bill, but also holding corporations accountable. From the offset of even before the bill hit Governor Kemp's desk, that fateful day that Representative Park Cannon met her fate in being arrested for simply just knocking on the door because she just wanted to see the bill be signed. But even before that occurred, we, along with New Georgia Project, Georgia NAACP, and various other organizations, we initiated a corporate pressure campaign holding corporations within the state of Georgia accountable for the contributions that they made to elected officials and state legislators in the state of Georgia that supported SB 202 and other egregious voter suppression bills, not just in the state of Georgia, but across the country. Because some of these corporations that did get called out, they weren't just contributing just to the state of Georgia state legislators. They were contributing to state legislators across the country who support voter suppression bills. Corporations such as Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Delta, they were called out, and they were called out for their actions. And it was simply just a situation of, hey, so all last year in 2020, you made these wonderful, lovely advertisements about Black Lives Matter, and you had your employees in Black Lives Matter t-shirts and masks on, doing these wonderful and great commercials. Now put your money where your mouth is. First and foremost, use your platform as a corporation to stop this bill from being passed, or now since it's passed and signed into law, allow people to know how egregious this bill is, and let the state government know, hey, you all have the power to repeal this bill. Governor Kemp, you have the power to repeal this bill. So if you don't repeal this bill, then there are things that are going to happen. There are consequences that are going to occur. Also use your platform to tell federal legislators to pass HR 1 and HR 4, which essentially with HR 4, it would put us in a position to where these voter suppression bills that are being passed across the country will be null and void, because that will pretty much cancel that out. And then the final thing is really put your money where your mouth is and stop contributing to these campaigns and to these candidates and to these elected officials who support these voter suppression bills. And so with that, once the initial ad came out in Georgia, we then started doing direct actions across the state, whether at the World of Coca-Cola, Home Depot headquarters in Atlanta. We did one at the Atlanta Airport at the Delta terminal, Delta headquarters. There was a state attorney in the state of Georgia who was a sponsor of the bill, and so we actually went to his office at, I think it was like a county commission office, but that's where his office was at, and we basically did a protest there to the point where the county commission voted in favor to cancel that particular attorney's contract, um, off of that alone. So these were actions and maneuvers that we were moving on. But once the bill itself did go into law, then Black Voters Matter, New Georgia Project, and Rise Org, they then filed a lawsuit. And the lawyer that we're actually currently using is the person that every time Trump filed a lawsuit about voter fraud, that lawyer then turned around and had victory as far as, yeah, so your voter fraud claim, null and void. And so it's literally the same lawyer. So
That's awesome. Thank you for, well, it's not awesome, the bills, but the actions that y'all were doing are awesome is what I meant to say. So thank you for sharing around that. And I want to turn us to kind of a bill that I think a lot of folks don't know about yet, but this is another bill that is going to be really, really harmful if it does pass, which is Senate Bill 90. And I'm going to toss it to Abdullah to explain a little bit about like what Senate Bill 90 is and what it would do.
Right. Well, like I said earlier, what we're seeing across the country is a concentrated effort to roll back voting rights. And that's in response to historic turnout. So what we're seeing in Florida is it's moving in two vehicles. And the Senate version, they have Senate Bill 90. What this bill does, it does a few things. Probably one of the most egregious ones is that it completely removes drop boxes for your vote by mail ballots. Last year, 4.8 million people voted by mail in Florida. Of those, 1.5 million people used a drop box to make sure that their ballot was received on time. Obviously, there were some concerns in 2020 about the post office and its ability to deliver ballots on time. And in Florida, if your ballot doesn't arrive before 7 p.m. on election day, even if it's postmarked on election day, it won't count. And so 1.5 million Floridians use drop boxes to make sure that their ballot was received and their vote counted. This bill would completely remove that ability for voters, and voters enjoyed the convenience of being able to just pull up and drop your ballot in the drop box and you're done. So that's definitely the most egregious one. It also, what it does is it would retroactively cancel any pending vote by mail requests. How it usually works right now in law is if you sign up for vote by mail, it's good for 2 election cycles. So if you signed up for a vote by mail in 2020, you would be covered through the 2022 election. Under this bill, it would wipe out all current requests. So everyone who already signed up for vote by mail would have to do it again. And obviously that presents a problem because some people might not know. They might not be aware. They might be expecting their vote by mail ballot, and it might never come in the mail. So that then falls on the supervisors of elections to reach out to voters to say, hey, your vote by mail request is now null and void. You have to do it again. The problem with that is this bill doesn't allow any money for that. So the Supervisors of Elections Association has estimated that just for that education and outreach alone to people whose vote by mail requests have will be expired under this, that would cost anywhere between $14 and $16 million. And there are, senators during the hearing were telling them that they were getting messages from supervisors who said, we can't afford this. So not only are you taking that choice away from voters and canceling their requests, but then you're also putting this unfunded mandate on our administrators of elections, the ones who people trust the most to carry these out. You're putting this on them and not helping them out in any way at all.
I'd love to hear from Idelia. What does the league think about this bill?
Well, of course, we're not supporting it, and we've been sending out alerts to our membership for the last several days. Now, I heard today during our lobby days, we have these, every so often to bring us up to speed on various legislation and also to make contact with our legislators. Well, in this meeting today, heard that SB 90 is going to be postponed. And right now, we don't know what the changes are going to be in that bill, but we anticipate that there will be some changes. And so we'll have to regroup and educate our membership and the public, for that matter, as to what these changes are. You can always hope that they pulled some of the negative items out of the bill, but well, I'm always saying things that I probably shouldn't be saying, but you just don't know what their thought process is and the rationale for their actions. So I can't say at this point that the reiteration of the bill will be more palatable, because I don't believe it. But it's going to be interesting to see what the new nuances will be. So it was supposed to have been heard tomorrow, and that was canceled due to these changes that they're going to amend the bill. So I don't know, except that it was the largest election, the 2020. 77% of the voters voted, and a large percentage of them voted by mail. And so to take that away, what's your point? What is your purpose for doing that? And it's quite simply voter suppression. You're going to harm the elderly. You're going to harm those with disability. Another portion of the current bill says that you can't collect. A number of churches collect the vote by mail ballots because they have the elderly and possibly a number of people who are disabled, and collect them and drop them in the box. You can no longer do that, as there was something in there about an affidavit that has to be signed before you can transport the ballots. Nonsensical kinds of things. So that's pretty much all I know right now. I hope we hear about the changes tomorrow or early next week.
Right. To kind of piggyback off of your point, ideally, working people, elderly citizens,
yes,
people with mobility impairments, they should never be frightened to ask their family and friends for help with casting their ballot. And that's what this would do. It would criminalize, especially during this pandemic, what we've seen in a lot of, and some supervisors have even testified to seeing it, is especially vulnerable people to COVID. What they would do is they would kind of have their community and say, hey, well, I'm very vulnerable to COVID. I don't want to risk my health to vote. You're a neighbor and I trust you. Could you please take my ballot for me and drop it off? That would make that a crime. And
Yes.
that's
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. And touching on the pandemic, we're still dealing with the effects of the biggest public health crisis of our lives. And rather than fixing our broken unemployment system that millions of Floridians have been suffering under, or providing any sort of COVID relief to Floridians, instead of or even further streamlining our ability to administer elections, certain legislators are seeking to suppress access to voting. So what this bill does is it would just make it more difficult for Floridians to vote, and then threaten them with that criminal liability.
And it's just the opposite of the comments after the election. Those comments where we had the safest, fraud less, and I probably coined that word just now, but it was without fraud, it was safe, and it was a record voter turnout simply because we had access to vote by mail. And so SB 90, similar to Georgia, makes it more difficult to utilize that process. It's like a solution looking for a problem.
That's the perfect way to describe it. And Governor DeSantis admitted as much when he announced this same legislation. At that same press conference, he said how Florida had the most seamless elections in the country. And he was correct. We had no problems on election day leading up to the election. We received bipartisan praise for how we administered our elections. There was no reason for this legislation. And like you said, it's a solution in search of a problem.
And we get no comments from the legislators, well, no rational comments as to why you are submitting this bill when you just said a couple of days ago all of the things, Adila, that you said about the election. So I don't know, things are just getting more and more nonsensical with regard to the election process.
Listen, even there's not one supervisor of election official in the state of Florida that agrees with this bill. So
no.
The direct entity responsible for voting does not agree with what the legislator is doing. It's still going through. And on top of that, you have to think about, there's nothing in this bill that mentions how it's getting paid for. That means that we are paying for it. We are $14 million that was mentioned earlier is coming out of our pockets to pay for something that we don't need and nobody wants.
And didn't ask for. And therefore, we taxpayers need to iterate that to the legislators. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay for it. There's no reason to have it in the first place.
Right. And in committee, one of the legislators in support of this bill said that they would just recommend that counties cut spending in their budget without raising taxes so that they could pay for this outreach. So not only is this completely unnecessarily bill going through, but then we're also going to have important services to our communities being cut because of it.
It impacts other things that are very necessary, like education, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I have to say, it's nonsensical. So what is that saying? Rob Peter to pay Paul, or something like that. Oh, goodness.
I'd love to hear from Jamil, because I know you're really involved in the organizing against this bill. What do you see as like the next steps for individuals and for organizations to advocate against SB 90?
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate Dr. Phillips for bringing up the solution looking for a problem quote. I think that's like the biggest sentiment for either one of these bills that we've been discussing on this evening. I mean, it's like literally. So, to Abdilla's standpoint, 1.4 million Floridians used drop boxes for vote by mail, and now you're willing to take that away. You're going to have to give additional information on your vote by mail request application. stuff that you've probably already given them on your voter registration form. So now I gave you this on my voter registration form, and now I got to give you this on my vote by mail ballot. These things
And
are
that
these things
isn't
are
that kind
mind-blowing.
of an invasion of privacy to put that kind of personal information on the envelope. Now the claim is that there's going to be a security tab or something that will protect your personal information. But as you said, why would you ask for it again?
And that security still doesn't protect me from the person that actually has to process this particular application.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at a situation now here in Florida where, for all intents and purposes, a lot of organizations have built a coalition stating that we feel as though the state legislature is sending us back to Jim Crow 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, there were papers across the state that an ad was placed in papers across the state from this coalition, similar to how it was done in Georgia. Same thing here in Florida. We asked for corporations to be held accountable for their actions because there was a report that came out through Popular Education that stated that there were many corporations that's based here in the state of Florida and others who contributed funds to state legislators and elected officials who support both HB1 as well as SB 90. And the story focused more on SB 90, but we did personal research and found out that a couple of these same corporations also gave to state legislators that support HB1. And so with that, the situation now is threefold, just like how it was in Georgia. Use your economic and corporate influence to tell state legislators to stop HB1 and SB 90. Use your corporate influence to tell federal legislators to support and help pass HR1 and HR4. And then use your corporate influence to divest your funds that you give from your corporations, to divest those funds from state and federal legislators that support anti-protest and voter suppression legislation. Because let's be clear, we've already mentioned on this town hall how SB 90 isn't the only type of voter suppression bill that's happening across the country. There are many others. Georgia just showed prime examples. If we go to the other end of the other bill that we've been discussing tonight, HB1, it's not the only bill. There are many others. They're trying to pass the exact same bill, the exact same language, word for word. They're trying to pass it in Alabama right now. It's already been passed in Tennessee. They're trying to pass the same bill in South Carolina, trying to pass the same bill in Arizona. This is a concerted effort by state legislatures across the country, most of whom are Republican majority state legislatures. It's a concerted effort by them to ensure that we can take Black and brown people off of the voting polls by either incarcerating them through means of protest, or removing them off of the voting polls through means of voter suppression. We ensure that we keep power. This is all that this is. Power is a dangerous tool in the wrong hands. And for so long, especially here in the state of Florida, it has been in the wrong hands of individuals who want to continue to perpetuate tools of white supremacy to keep their power. They feel as though we can't win it. We can't win these situations by means of good and just. So we have to continue to use these nefarious schemes, plots, and plans in order for us to continue to be in power, in order for us to continue to keep our majority in the House and in the Senate and in the cabinet, in the Capitol, because once HB1, if passed, once it hits DeSantis's desk and he puts his signature on the paper, it's law. It's not going to, they're not waiting until July the 1st. It's going to be law the moment he puts his pen to paper. And what happens then is something may occur similar to what happened last year, because we all know how officers get during the summer. It's hot, and they get a little hot as well. And we go right back outside, and we're involved in protests and rallies again. But this time, HB1 is on the books. Whether we're incarcerated or whether it's a felony conviction, whether we're incarcerated or whether it's probation, we're still going to be under a felony conviction, and therefore that takes your voting rights away, and you're not getting your voting rights back by 2022. And so what happens? DeSantis is once again governor. But at the same time, if we can't do it through HB1, then we'll do it through SB 90. Nobody wants to give the last four of their social or a driver's license number on a vote by mail request application. Nobody wants to do that, because we've already done that on the voter registration form. We have people who live here in the state of Florida who have come down here to retire, and they don't have immediate family nearby. So how are they going to get their vote by mail ballots where it needs to be in the middle of a pandemic? Because let's be clear, we are still in the middle of a pandemic right now, and we probably will still be in this way at least by the spring or early summer of 2022. So we're still going to be in the midst of this while primary season is heavy. These are things to ensure that they stay in power. And so what we have to do is we have to hold corporations accountable, and we have to hold legislators accountable to, hey, the power is within the people, not within you all.
I don't even know how to follow that up, Jamil, because that was everything. So I don't know how to follow that up, but I wanted to leave space for folks. We're moving towards a closing real quick. I wanted to leave space. Do folks have any last words that y'all want to leave with the community about any of these bills?
Well, what I'll say is that, it might seem hopeless sometimes, but there is still things that you can do to affect the process and to create change. Contact your legislator, even if you feel that it's completely a waste of time. They keep track of how many people call and how many people email and how many people send letters. And it just continues to build that case. Whether they want to admit it publicly or not. They know behind the scenes, and they know when they're talking with each other about these bills, what the public backlash will be. So keep contacting your legislators. You can go to our website, aclufl.org, and we have ways that you can get in touch with your legislator about HB1 and SB 90. And like Jamil said, call out companies. Make sure that the companies that you give your money to are standing on the side of democracy and freedom, and aren't going to stand by while the days of Jim Crow are coming back towards us. We all know what kind of an outsized influence corporations play in our elections and our politics, and it's time that we flip the script and make it a force for good.
I'm with Abdillah. As the State League president has said many times, contact your legislators, flood their telephones, fill their email boxes with your messages that say vote no on these bills, and let them know how you feel. Because even though it looks like power is being taken away from the populace, we still have power, and it's called communication. So we have to let them know that you are impacting our lives with these egregious bills, that we won't stand for it. And I'm going to say that those words again about election time, we will remember.
Um, Hi Publix, hi Geo Group, hi Disney. Um, some of you all did say that you value Black lives. It's time to show it.
Very true. I would say just reach out. As all these organizations on this panel, it's a way to make tangible change. I understand that you see how it's playing out and it doesn't look hopeful, but we're all here to help. We have YouTube videos where you tell about legislation that's going on. We have Instagram, Facebook, petitions to sign online. There's so much you can do from your smartphones. You don't have to go march on the streets anymore. You can do that if you want to, but even if you don't, that's not your way of doing it. Sign a petition online. Make your voice heard to ensure that there's strength in numbers. We're not just going to stand by idly and let this go by. There are people watching you. As Jamil said, hello to all of you. We're watching you and we're making sure that you're making the right decision. So be sure to do your due diligence to make sure you're stepping out and being an activist yourself. So I will encourage each person watching this to do that.
Can we just take a second to just give a huge thank you to our panelists who are amazing people. This is one of the best panels I've been on. Thank y'all so much. Y'all should give yourselves applause. Amazing. I'm so grateful to know each of you and work with y'all, and just want to thank you again for joining. Thank you, Facebook. Thanks for everyone who watched. Sorry, I'm seeing Sammy's comments. She commented, companies, Black Lives Matter. Also companies when they can actually help, crickets. Facts. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope that you all have a wonderful night and call your legislators. Thank you.